Cookies. Playing. I like little kids. Hey everyone, so the 5th episode of Riverdale aired a couple of weeks ago and it was absolutely amazing. I haven't had a chance to sit down and film until now, but fabulous. The episode begins with us kind of being introduced to the Blossom family residence, which is called Thornhill, which right away with the creep factor that I was getting from just what they were showing as well as what people were saying, all I was thinking was Jane Eyre completely. And then they mentioned that there was a cemetery on the property. And I'm not sure about you guys, but I would not be okay owning a house with a cemetery on the land. It just seems way too strange. And the fact that they're allowed to actually bury their own descendants and ancestors and everything in that cemetery just seems like a huge no-no. It just seems like something that is just way past normal. Mrs. Blossom states a phrase to Cheryl as well in the beginning, and she says, "No more sleeping in Jason's bed." That creeped me out more because remember I told you I was getting some weird incest vibe, and that was just like, no, no, no. I know that she's probably just sleeping in that bed since he died because it's a memory of him, right? It probably still smells like him. It's his room. It's his space. She's just kind of enveloping herself in Jason's stuff. But it just seems too weird. And honestly, Mrs. Blossom, the more I see her, the more freaked out I get because she is a serial mom. I feel like she is 100% hands down a serial mom who doesn't care if her kids live or die. You have later on Grandma Blossom stating to Betty, what is it? It's snip it off your finger. That phrase gets used and I'm just like, oh my word, this is horrible. And then she also states that she's shipping Cheryl off somewhere to like a boarding school or something because no one would have her. What parent says that to their child? Also, what exactly does she mean no one would have her? Like, was she going to give her to a relative? Was she trying to marry her off? Was she trying to sell her to somebody? Like, you don't say that phrase. But yes, Mrs. Blossom is totally hands down a serial killer parent who should never be near anybody. She should be locked up in an insane asylum. Okay, Jughead's reaction to Betty and Trevor. He seemed really upset and he just, seemed not okay with it, and it just made me ship the two of them even more because, let's be honest, I am a huge shipper of Betty and Jughead since that last episode. Since episode 4, I was just like, straight up, I was like, let's see something happen between the two of them, and I really hope something happens between the two of them, because you also see him show up dressed in formal clothes to go to the funeral with Betty, and the two of them kind of did that whole weird exchange when they first saw each other, and I was just like, oh, I feel really bad because this is a funeral, so I should feel sad, but it's also one of those moments where I was like, okay, I'm loving this moment. Archie and Val, I'm kind of seeing between the two of them in this episode some stuff that's going to take place later on. I feel like he's going to kind of pull Val in as kind of, his helping hand that will pull him out of what Mrs. Grundy did to him. And I think that's good on one hand, because I think that Val's willing to tell him how it is. Like, she told him straight up. She's like, are you doing this for you or for someone else? Like, you have to figure out what you want. Somebody says that you've got it, and so you're like, oh, I've got it. Somebody says you don't, and you're like, oh, I don't. You need to make up your mind. Stop listening to what other people say. Make up your mind and just do it. I feel like she's a really strong person to kind of go against Archie, because Archie's one of those ones where he kind of lets people kind of nudge him in the direction he should go, kind of like, let's get this ball rolling. Somebody has to push him in that direction. And I think Val is that character that's going to do it. And I think the two of them, I'd kind of like to see something happen between the two of them. Just saying. Jason and Polly's situation is really strange because this entire episode was kind of surrounding Jason and Polly. You find out that, like, a couple episodes ago, you find out about a fight, but Trevor also brings in the fact that Jason was thought to be selling drugs. He was also selling his stuff. And you also have the fact that you find out that Polly tried to kill herself. And it's really unfortunate. Like, in that moment where Mr. Cooper is explaining this to Betty, like, my heart broke for him. And then you see him watching the video of Polly as a child. And again, it was one of those things where I just felt really, really, like, I connected with Mr. Cooper with that. But, I don't know. Then you have, like, Mr. Blossom and Mr. Cooper's kind of interaction at the funeral. And then you find out about, like, Mr. Blossom's great-grandfather killed Mr. Cooper's great-grandfather. I think it was their grandfather did it because it would be Betty's great-grandfather. So I believe it was Mr. Cooper's and Mr. Blossom's grandfather did that. And you find out about that and you're like, this is so twisted. Like, so twisted. Like, the city, that's why the Blossoms are rich and the Coopers are kind of just that mediocre family. But then, like, you have Mr. Cooper kind of, like, snap at Betty. And when that happens, first off, your thought is Polly actually sick? Because with how he reacted, you don't know, especially with him stating Polly was sick, so we sent her away and she's not coming back until she's better. So you're thinking, okay, number one, is Polly actually sick? Number two, how deep is Mr. Cooper actually involved in all of this? And then the revelation of who broke into the sheriff's house, Mr. Cooper. Seriously? Like, I'm really worried. Like, the minute that Betty was willing to admit to put her dad on that board of suspects, that was the moment that I thought, are they actually going to have it that her father did this? Are they going to have it that the Coopers are just as bad as the Blossoms? And that worried me. That worried me a bit. Also, with regards to Jason and Polly, you find out from Grandmother Blossom that she gave a ring to Polly, like a family heirloom ring. And that's where the whole phrase, snip it off your finger, comes in. But Betty states that Polly and Jason were engaged. From how Grandma Blossom spoke, it sounded like the two of them were married because she stated something like your one true love died or you lost a husband. Like, it made me think that they'd already gotten married. So I'm like, what exactly is going on? And possibly with him sending Polly off and with everything that you find out about Jason near the end, like selling stuff off to save money, could Polly perhaps be pregnant? The Blossom parents at the dinner with Cheryl and Veronica was really awkward, but it also made you realize, like, again, another thing with how Cheryl is the way that she is due to the fact of how her parents are. Like, the fact that she's still willing to, you know, kind of give some lip back to her parents, that kind of shocks me because it shows that she's a lot stronger than she seems, and you realize why she's had to be a lot stronger. You also have when Cheryl starts talking about how she wants to make a speech, but her parents won't allow it. Betty, why do I keep going to say Betty? Veronica goes and encourages her, and she's like, I'll help you. She's like, what's the worst that they can do? Cheryl actually goes and says, they'll kill me. So, again, on that line of, like, her parents should not have had children or been anywhere near them because, you know, for a child to state that their parents would kill them, yeah, that's terrifying. Mrs. Blossom's reaction to Archie, though, complete opposite to Cheryl. Like, you can tell that, you know, Mrs. Blossom loved her son more than she loved her daughter, number one. Number two, her reaction to Archie seemed a lot more than just parental, if you're getting my drift. Like, I've just basically gotten to the point where I don't trust anybody. And I'm thinking the worst of all of the characters, because that is literally what this is. It's like the worst of all of these characters are coming out. But I'm really enjoying it. I'm liking this whole crash and burn scenario. Yeah, her reaction to Archie was quite interesting. Now, talking about Archie, one last thing. His hand. You saw him, Kate? Like, he kept rubbing it. Was it, which? I think it was his left hand. I think it was his left, like, wrist. He kept going and, like, touching it, and, like, he wasn't, like, there's something wrong with his wrist. And part of me is really happy that when Reggie went to help him and Archie turned him down, Archie actually does listen to him, just like he listens to Val, and he actually allows Reggie to be the captain of the football team. But, like, I'm really worried that something's going to come of his hand and he's not going to be able to play anymore. And, oh my word, that just, really? Does he have to take some more hard hits? Because I feel like that's what's going to happen. But I really enjoyed that whole interaction between Archie and Reggie. But I'd like to see Reggie drawn into the story a bit more. I'd like to see him play a bit more of a role in the part of Reggie. More for good than for, like, the side that I feel like Chuck is going to be on in the next episode. I feel like Chuck is going to appear in, like, every single episode because of that whole foreshadowing stating, like, in a few weeks kind of thing. But, like, Reggie, please be helping Archie and his gang. Don't go with Chuck. Please. I beg you. The final thing that I want to discuss is Cheryl in the white dress when she came out in that. I think that that was a huge statement to make by coming out in that garment. I didn't realize, though, until she spoke it, that she was actually wearing that in the beginning of the series. And I think that it just really goes to show that everything is getting pulled in. This is its own little world. It does connect. I don't know, like, there's so much involved with that one statement that I think it's going to just shift the entire rest of the story for the season. And the final thing is, when she stated, "We failed you, all of us," and broke down crying, there's more there than she is saying, because I understand that she feels guilt at not being able to save him from being killed. But honestly, there's something going on there with regards to Mrs. Blossom. Not so much Mr. Blossom. I feel like Mr. Blossom and Mr. Cooper just have their own internal strife going on with each other. But Mrs. Blossom, I feel like, has a bigger role in this than you think. And I think the main reason why she doesn't like Cheryl is I feel like Cheryl knows more about what is going on with Mrs. Blossom than people know. And that Mrs. Blossom, you know, is aware of as well. Or maybe she is aware of it. But I feel like the reason why she dislikes Cheryl is because Cheryl found something out, like some huge issue with Mrs. Blossom. And because of that, she's got it out for Cheryl. So guys, that was my episode talk. As I said, there's so much going on. I kind of was jumping all over the place. But the thing with this is all of the episodes flow so smoothly through. There isn't a lot of, like, you know, confusion as to what's going on unless, like, they're intentionally doing that. But the thing is, there's so much going on in this one episode, more so than the other 4 before it, that I can't believe it. Like, it's so amazing. I'm gushing. I forced other people to watch it. I can't get over talking about this to enough people because it's fabulous. It's 100% fabulous, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you in my next video. Until then, go and have a lovely day, and I love you guys. Bye!